In this episode, we're exploring the core traits that make a business name not just good, but truly great. Margot Bushnaq, founder and CEO of BrandBucket, shares what separates forgettable names from unforgettable brands, how to balance creativity with practicality, and why emotional connection plays a critical role in naming success. If you're trying to find a name that not only represents your business today, but also grows with you into the future, this is the conversation you need to hear. Let's get into it. All right. So, in the next segment, we're going to be talking about traits of a great business name.
Okay.
What makes a business name truly great beyond just being available?
It's great if you can tell a story with it. If you can link it back to something, how it makes your customers feel, or the whole why behind your business. So every business should have a why they exist. And if your name can tie back into that story, and the why is much more about it's not the what. It's not what you do or who you do it for or how you do it. The why is the reason for existence of this product. Who needed it? What problem is it solving? And if the name speaks to that piece, it's great.
Very cool. How do you define the difference between a good name and a great name?
Just if a good name can maybe describe what a product does. And your customer will know to go for you because when I need that thing, I know to go to that company because their name is that product or that solution. But they're never going to truly feel an emotional connection to it because it's not easing their pain. It's not solving their problem. Maybe it is, but your name isn't reminding them on a daily basis when they type it in or when they tell someone about it, that your brand is solving that problem for them. So if your name can speak to the why of why your company is around in the first place, your customer will grow to love you.
Why is it important to go beyond personal taste when evaluating a business name?
That's why branding and naming agencies get the big bucks, is because the founder's decision on the name it's so personal, and usually their voice is so strong that sometimes their opinion on taste isn't the best, but they're going to force that taste upon all the employees or other stakeholders in the organization because they're the founder, because they had the original idea. But if they can take a step back and be advised, either by friends and acquaintances or run a contest online or go through a naming agency and pay a lot of money. But if you can actually sit back and check your ego and have other people tell you that your name is great or not great, then you're okay on taste. But sometimes the founder's taste is great and they just have to go for it.
So interesting. So then maybe building on that, like how do you balance between your own emotional attachment to a name as a founder and the advice that you get from other stakeholders in the business?
There does have to be one decision maker. Whenever there are too many cooks in the kitchen, it's going to be really, really hard to nail down a name. And the the passion that you have for your business as a founder is going to be stronger than anyone else you bring in. Sometimes there's two co-founders and the passion was built up between the two of them, and that's fine. You can have two decision makers, but any more than that, you're going to run into a lot of opinions and a lot of taste. And balancing, again, you should, as a founder, be very open-minded and not be so closed that when you do get advice from other stakeholders or outside people, sit with the advice and go over the advice before deciding that it's wrong advice. Give yourself time.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is you, as the founder, you're ultimately going to be making the decision, but allow others to kind of influence your journey into finding the name, because it is, having your own personal attachment all the time might not be the best path forward. Other ideas can come from other advisors and other stakeholders.
And your other advisors and stakeholders, in a sense, represent your first customers. And if your idea for the name doesn't resonate with them, then there's a red flag there. You need to step back and realize, okay, what is it representing incorrectly, or what is it not representing? And maybe I should go back to the drawing board.
Yeah. Yeah. Achieving greatness, I guess, it's a journey, and you need to be somewhat open-minded. Makes great sense. Yeah, very cool. Next, we're going to talk about the core traits of strong names. Why is simplicity such a powerful trait in brand names?
The best names are short. You can fit them all on a bottle. They can, and it's the perfect formula for a great name is really, really hard to come by. You're going for, short as far as length. You're going for short as far as amount of syllables, amount of words. You want it to be spelled correctly. You want it to be easy to pronounce across multiple languages. And there's very, very few names that fit the bill for all of these features. But the most important ones are names that just evoke a sense of what your brand is. So you can have a name like Sephora, that if I walked up to you and told you I'm starting a business named Sephora, you would have no idea. You would have no initial guess as to what I'm about to tell you I'm going to do. But if I told you I'm starting a store focused on beauty and perfume and skincare, my target audience is women, and my name is Sephora, there'd be kind of this aha moment of, okay, I get it. I kind of feel like Euphoria, and it sounds like a female name, and it just sounds pleasant, and it's, short enough where it can be written on the wall behind the cash registers. And so it's sometimes coming up with the perfect name isn't just, it has to be short, it has to be this. It's the perfect mix, but at the same time, when you find something that fits most of those factors and it gives you that feeling, it gives you the right feeling, that's when you stop.
Makes perfect sense. How does memorability impact brand recognition and recall?
So you want your name to be memorable for when you're just starting as a company and you're just starting to attract your customers. They visit you once, you want them to come back. They hear it on the radio, you want them to visit you. Over time, though, if your brand is big enough and strong enough and people intentionally seek you out enough, being memorable isn't that big of a factor. The perfect example is Etsy. Etsy is 4 letters. It doesn't mean anything. It's not necessarily a common letter combination that evokes any other particular word. The Etsy founders just wanted something, really, really short and pretty pronounceable across multiple languages. It has nothing to do with what they grew into, which is a marketplace of creative people. But at this point, people don't really sit down and be like, what was the name of that marketplace again? Everyone just knows the name Etsy.
Yeah. Great. What role does emotional resonance play in whether a name connects with people?
It's the primary role. The name needs to evoke that love response or that attachment response for people to grow into loving and being attached to your brand. Nobody really will ever love cars.com. But people, and they may have a good experience with cars.com, they will write a good review, but they're never just going to be like, oh, that's the best. But like Carvana is something that actually, it has that spark there that could have people be really attached to it. And a brand can actually have a response both ways. People, if it gives an emotional response and people have a bad experience, they can really dislike you, which you can live with. If you have good customer service, you'll eventually bring more people around that like you. But the potential for love is going to be much, much higher with a name that people can really grab a hold of and make it their own.
Yep. Yeah. One of my favorite car-related brands is what started out as a blog is Petrolicious. And you hear it the first time and it's like, petrol and delicious is really not necessarily something that you would combine, but for a gearhead, you would be looking at it and you'll be like, oh, Petrolicious. That's kind of like interesting. It'll probably, you do connect with the brand before knowing what content they have behind them or what they're providing. So that's very cool.
Yeah, that name makes no sense, but when they build the brand behind it, then it makes perfect sense.
Yep. Yeah.
I love when that happens.
Yeah, that's awesome. Uniqueness and flexibility is our next topic. Why does a name need to be unique in today's saturated market?
Saturated meaning that if you're entering a space with lots of other competitors at this point,
Yep.
if your name is the same or very similar to one of your competitors, aside from trademark issues that you're going to run into, you're not going to be seen as different from them. You're going to be confused with them, which I guess if your competitor is huge and you're trying to ride on their coattails, that's great, but you'll never be able to grow into your own brand. But if your name is similar to a competitor of yours, you are not really allowing customers to grasp the message of why you're different and better. And until you actually go out there and convince them why you're different and better, you're never going to build a true customer base. So being different in your name from the get-go is very important.
Great. How can a great name stay flexible as a company grows and expands?
The name doesn't stay flexible. You have to build in the flexibility from the start. You have to choose a name that does not limit your scope. And most of the companies that give themselves a name after what they do or what they sell run into this problem. So if they ever decide to change or sell something else or sell more things, they're going to be limited. But if you start out either with an invented name that just evokes a feeling, or a name that describes why you exist, then you're going to be much more flexible and have the ability to grow your business and adapt your business and pivot your business in the future.
Makes sense. What's the risk of choosing a name that feels too niche or limiting?
If the name is niche and limiting, then your growth will be niche and limiting. If you're building a product that every person on earth is going to want, then fine. Like, name yourself after your product, because you have basically a huge customer base. But if if your customer is not every person on the planet, you don't want to limit your scope right off the bat. You want to appeal to as many people as possible now or in the future.
Yeah. So we're talking about practical considerations.
Mm-hmm.
How does domain availability factor into choosing a great business name? Distinguishing here between the actual domain name, exact match for your brand, versus like the brand that you want to actually build. How does the domain availability factor into your choice?
Most very short, simple domain names are taken, and most of them are actually in use, and it's going to be impossible to get that name and use it. Some brands feel so strongly about the word or phrase that they've chosen that they are completely happy to go with a variation of that. They don't have to have theirname.com. They'll add a suffix to it. They'll add app, or they'll add hey to the beginning, or get, or maybe they won't be on a .com. Maybe they'll be on a .io or a .gg or a .me. And there's nothing that really limits these companies from going with that. You will find that when some of these companies get big enough and get enough funding, they will then have to go after the single word .com, because there is customer leak. So if your name is Sketch and you're building your brand on sketchapp.com, there's going to be a certain percentage of people who will, either the first time they visit you, or that will just not remember and continuously try to find you on sketch.com. The bigger problem is when they want to email you. So if you try to visit a website and it's not there, you'll go back and you'll find it eventually. If you send an email to the wrong domain name, you may never know. It might not bounce back. It may go to a completely different company, and you'll think that you're being ignored. So there's customer leakage at a certain level. When you're making millions and billions of dollars, you need to have the most logical version of your name. But unicorn companies are unicorns for a reason, and there's lots of people who can get by having a variation on the word that they've tied their brand to.
What should entrepreneurs think about when it comes to spelling, pronunciation, or even global meaning? I know this question is hitting multiple attributes of a a a brand or a domain, but ultimately it's about what should I as an entrepreneur think about when I'm dealing with the spelling or the misspelling of a variation on the name, the pronunciation of that name, and how does it apply in different languages?
The applying in different languages is a tough one. Like, my go-to is just to Google the word and to see if it comes back with, any Wiktionary entry, or if Google comes back and says, did you mean, and it's something completely different. But you're never really going to know unless you have, if you plan for global domination, but you're starting off in an English-speaking country, you're never going to know if your name means something in some like rare language. But if your initial audience does encompass that rare language, absolutely go check that. But going back to spelling and pronunciation, the easiest way to figure out where a problem could lie is just to ask your friends. So with pronunciation, you write it down, slide it across the table, and see what they come back with. And spelling, it's the opposite. You tell them what your name is and then have them spell it. And misspellings can actually be really strong brands if they're easy to explain. So you can say, I'm Dig with 2 G's. And everyone will come back and say, okay, D-I-G-G. Or I'm Exact with 2 A's. They're like, oh, okay, E-X-A-A-C-T. And that can actually be really helpful to kind of build kind of a fun, edgy
Playfulness
to your name. Yeah. And actually help memorability, because they're going to remember if you say, my name is Exact versus my name is Exact with 2 A's, then there's a lot more kind of processing happening at the point where you tell them your name, and they're going to remember it more.
Interesting. How do you balance creativity with practical usability when naming a brand? The creative drive to be fun, loving, quirky, versus the practical usability, applicability of the brand.
I'm not a fan of practical usability of a brand. Practical to me is dishwashers.com. And as we've mentioned before, just you'll make a killing if you own that domain name and that's what you sell. But there's never going to be an emotional attachment to you. So if you're passionate about your business, if you want to have a business with personality, if you want to have a customer base that comes back to you when you launch a new version of something, then don't be practical.
Yeah. So, putting everything together, can you walk us through a name that you think checks all the boxes and why it works? I know that's a tough one. It's basically asking you to pick one out of many of your favorite brands that you've either been involved with or you're aware of.
I think one of the names that I've talked about before that we've sold that I had a particular attachment to because it was something that I thought up was Zomato. And I think it ticked all the boxes as far as spelling. It's tomato with a Z. If you told someone Zomato, it's tomato with a Z, they know how to, spell it back to you. You look at it on a piece of paper, that's going to be your go-to. You're immediately going to think, oh, it's tomato with the Z, so I know how to pronounce it. It's short. It kind of, to me, it evokes Zoom and tomato. It's kind of both things. And as a food delivery service, which is what it ended up being in India, it's a very tomato-heavy cuisine. And at the same time, it's fast. You got the Zoom. And at the same time, it's just youthful and fun and playful. And I think all across the board, it ticked all the boxes for what that company was going for.
That's cool. I like it. What's one mistake you see people make over and over when choosing names?
They go for trying to name what they do instead of the why of why they're building it.
Yeah.
Even if you don't go for the why, if you go for something more personal, something from the founder's past, based on the founder's name, from the location that you were founded in, just something with a bit more emotional attachment. The what is the type of name that just has no emotion to it whatsoever.
Very cool. That seems to be like a repetitive theme, is the emotional attachment to something that you can connect with.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. What final advice would you give to someone trying to decide on the perfect business name?
Brainstorm at first, but don't brainstorm names. Brainstorm all of the verbs and adjectives and feelings that you get from what your product offers. And then, at least for myself, brainstorming is very, very difficult, very, very draining, and it leads you down rabbit holes that you might necessarily want to avoid. So I find myself making a better selection of options when I can look at a list and just yes or no. So if I can go through a list of available options that are curated like BrandBucket is, and just go through, 50 no's to every one yes, and just be like, okay, that's a possibility, and be open to it. So even if something is totally left field, if there's a little spark in there of like, oh, that's cool, could I make that fit? Oh yeah, I can make that fit. Then add that to the list. And just start with this nice fat list of options that are really, don't start with one box and think outside the box. Start with 50 boxes and fill them and fill outside of them.
Yeah.
And just have a lot of different kind of options, and then go sleep on it and come back and start weeding out the ones that just don't give you that feeling of it's right. And at the end of the day, you'll end up with maybe 10 that actually you'd be totally happy with building if you could acquire any of the 10.
Finding the perfect name isn't just about creativity, it's about strategy and making a lasting impression. If you're ready to find a name that's memorable, meaningful, and perfectly aligned with your business vision, visit brandbucket.com. Explore a curated marketplace of premium business names and make sure your brand starts off on the right foot, or find its new identity if you're rebranding. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.